Around the year 1300, a cartographer sat down in an Ebstorf monastery in northern Germany. He had a task: to draw the world, every kingdom, every continent, every known edge of human geography. But this wasn't going to be an ordinary map. What he created over the next several years was a vision so strange, so theologically radical, that historians today still argue about what it means. It was called the Ebstorf Map, and it was, essentially, the body of God. The entire world, every continent, every ocean, every corner of the known universe was drawn as the flesh of Christ. His head occupied the top of the map, facing upward toward heaven. His hands stretched to the sides, reaching across Europe and Asia. His feet pointed downward into the southern hemisphere. And inside his body, drawn with careful precision, were the cities, kingdoms, and seas of medieval Christendom. It was nearly 4 meters tall and 3.5 meters wide. 30 separate pieces of parchment sewn together. One of the largest maps ever created in the Middle Ages. It took years to complete, years of labor, precision, theological contemplation. For 500 years, the map hung in the Ebstorf monastery. Pilgrims came to see it. Monks studied it. Scholars referenced it. It was one of the greatest cartographic achievements of medieval Europe. Then, on a night in 1943, everything changed. A bombing raid. A fire. The Nazi regime, aware that the Ebstorf map was being studied by historians and scientists, ordered it destroyed. Or perhaps it was simply collateral damage. Either way, the map burned. The original was completely incinerated, gone, erased from history. All that remains today are photographs, black and white images taken in the decades before its destruction, a handful of drawings, some written descriptions. The original map exists only in the memory of those who saw it. But here's what keeps scholars awake at night. Why? Why did this medieval monk, this cartographer working in a monastery in northern Germany, decide that the way to represent the world was as the literal body of Christ? Why not just draw a map? Why introduce the human form? Why make the geography into flesh and blood? The obvious answer is theology. In medieval Christianity, everything was understood as part of God's creation. Humanity was made in God's image. Creation itself was seen as divine. To map the world as the body of God was to say something profound about reality, that geography, humanity, and divinity were not separate concepts. They were one. The world literally lived inside God. It's a beautiful interpretation, a philosophical statement rendered in cartography. But then you look closer at the details, and things get strange. The map is accurate, not perfectly accurate. Medieval cartography had limits, but shockingly so. The proportions, while distorted by the human form, roughly correspond to reality. Distances are recognizable. Coastlines follow actual geography. You can identify specific cities and kingdoms. It's not just an abstract theological vision. It's a functioning map. Someone who had detailed knowledge of world geography created this. Someone who understood space, distance, and scale. Which raises an impossible question. Did the medieval cartographer choose to bend geography to fit the human form, or was he working with real knowledge about the world and discovered that it seemed to fit the shape of a body? Some historians argue that the Ebstorf map is actually a sophisticated piece of religious propaganda, a statement to the Church's authority. God's body contains all known geography. The Church, as God's representative on earth, therefore contains all worldly authority. Submit to Rome, the map says silently. Submit to God. They are the same. Other scholars see it differently. They argue that the map represents something closer to mysticism, The medieval mind saw connections between the microcosm, the human body, and the macrocosm, the entire universe. As above, so below. The body of Christ, when expanded infinitely, becomes the body of the earth. Geography is anatomy. Cartography is theology. A third group of historians refuses to give the map a meaning at all. They see it as the work of a brilliant, obsessive mind, perhaps a mind touched by something like madness, a cartographer who spent decades trying to impose order and meaning on a chaotic world by giving it shape, by giving it a body. Any of these interpretations could be true, but the Nazis destroyed the original before we could know for certain. In 1943, when the Allied bombs fell on Ebstorf, when the map burned in the monastery fire, something shifted. The map became impossible to study directly. It became a ghost, a legend, a photograph of a thing that no longer existed. We can never know what details we might have discovered if we had been able to examine it in person. What secrets might be hidden in ink that only survives in these black and white photographs? The Ebstorf map raises a question that medieval historians still cannot answer. Was this an act of profound theological genius? A statement about the unity of all creation? Or was it madness? The obsessive work of someone whose mind had bent too far toward symbolism and metaphor. And perhaps most disturbing, why did the Nazis think it was important enough to destroy? They burned books. They destroyed art. They tried to erase entire cultures. But the Ebstorf map was only one medieval manuscript, one artifact among millions. Why order its destruction specifically? What did they see in a 700-year-old map that frightened them enough to make sure it never survived the war? We'll never know. All we have are photographs, images of a world shaped like God's body, a universe given flesh, a map that tried to show us not where things are, but what they mean. The Ebstorf map was destroyed. The original is gone forever, but the questions it asks remain, and they're impossible to answer now. Because sometimes, the most disturbing maps aren't the ones drawn on parchment. They're the ones we destroy.